This story is titled, My Girlfriend Constantly Threatened to Leave Me for My Best Friend Until One Day I Had Enough, Packed Her Stuff, and Took Back All My Valuable Belongings While She Was Gone. Subreddit. My name is Tyler, and I'm 29 years old. I live in Virginia and work as an electrical systems coordinator, which basically means I manage power grid installations and coordinate repair crews. It's my job to make sure transformers show up before someone's standing in a field with blueprints and no equipment. My cousin Marcus runs one of the electrical contractor teams we work with regularly. He handles the heavy lifting while I keep the chaos off his back. The system works pretty well for both of us. I make decent money that allows me to live comfortably and save some cash on the side. When I'm not working, I love taking Bruno, my golden retriever, on hiking trails around the area. On weekends, I often build model airplane kits. It's something I've been passionate about for years. I've been living on my own since my mid-20s. Ever since my parents divorced when I was in high school. My social circle isn't huge, but it's solid. I have one close cousin and a few good friends who've been in my corner since college. I'm not really the party scene type of guy. I prefer quieter gatherings and meaningful conversations. I'd had a few long-term relationships over the years that didn't go anywhere, but I wasn't stressed about it. I always figured I'd meet the right person eventually. I wasn't desperate or actively searching. I was just open to the possibility when it came along. Then I met Victoria. And everything changed. We met at a birthday dinner for a mutual friend. And honestly, I wasn't even supposed to go that night. It was one of those might as well decisions where I figured I'd show up for an hour and head home. Victoria came in late, loud and laughing, immediately hugging everybody in the room. My first impression was that she was probably too intense for someone like me. I tend to be more reserved and observational. But somehow we ended up sitting next to each other at dinner. She made some sarcastic comment about the music playlist the restaurant was playing, and we both cracked up. I quickly realized she was sharp and confident, not the kind of person who waits for an opening to speak. She creates her own openings and commands attention naturally. That's completely different from my personality. I usually sit back, listen, and only speak when I have something meaningful to add to the conversation. Despite our different approaches, we clicked in a way that surprised me. She texted me later that night, and 2 days later we met for coffee. A week after that, we went to dinner. Those first couple of months were actually really good. Like genuinely good in ways I hadn't experienced before. She would call me during her lunch breaks just to chat, send me funny videos throughout the day, and ask about my projects at work. Even though she didn't understand a single thing about electrical systems or power grids, she seemed genuinely interested in what I was doing. I loved how she could light up any room she walked into. Being with her made me feel like I didn't have to carry everything by myself for once. She had her own life, her own circle of friends, and her own career in marketing for a catering company. From what I could tell, she was doing well professionally and seemed to have her life together. Now, I'm not stupid. I noticed early on that Victoria could be a little reactive to certain situations. The first time we disagreed about something, and I mean this was barely even a disagreement, it was over a TV show. I liked it, she hated it, which should have been no big deal. But she went on this mini rant about how it's always guys who think dumb action shows are somehow deep and meaningful. It wasn't exactly a fight, but her response felt unnecessarily sharp and personal. I pushed back a little and told her she was being extra about it. Surprisingly, she actually apologized afterward and said she gets defensive when she feels dismissed or misunderstood. At the time, I thought that was fair enough. Everyone has their triggers, and at least she was self-aware about it. But that wouldn't be the last time something like this happened. The first real conflict came a few weeks later. We'd made plans to go to my buddy Kevin's housewarming party. Kevin's been my day one friend since college. He's a good dude who keeps things casual and laid back. I told Victoria about the vibe ahead of time. Backyard barbecue, a couple of games on the patio TV, nothing fancy. Just friends hanging out and celebrating Kevin's new place. She showed up in heels and a cocktail dress. Meanwhile, I was wearing jeans and a polo shirt. Don't get me wrong, she looked absolutely amazing. But I could immediately tell she was annoyed by the disconnect. When we walked into Kevin's backyard and she saw the lawn chairs and cornhole setup, I watched her face change. "You said it was a party," she whispered to me, eyeing the casual setup with obvious disappointment. "It is a party," I replied, genuinely confused by her reaction. "Yeah, for middle-aged dads," she said under her breath. I laughed a little, trying to keep the mood light. "Babe, it's chill. We're here to hang out with good people. No pressure, just enjoy yourself." But Victoria was cold the entire night. She didn't try to talk to anyone, barely participated in conversations, and spent most of the time scrolling on her phone. When we finally left, She was completely quiet in the car, which I knew meant trouble was coming. Sure enough, once we got back to my place, she let it all out. "I don't get why you never consider my vibe when we make plans," she said, her voice rising. "Do you not want me to feel special when we go out together? Do you not care if I'm comfortable in these situations?" I told her straight up, "Victoria, this wasn't a dress-up thing. I explained the plan and the vibe beforehand, and you chose your outfit based on that information. No one there judged you for being overdressed, but you kind of made it weird for yourself by acting like you were too good for the whole thing." She accused me of being condescending, and I told her she was overthinking what should have been a fun, relaxed evening with friends. We didn't talk much for the rest of the night, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The next morning, she apologized and said she had felt out of place and took her frustration out on me. I told her, "It's okay, but I don't do drama over small stuff like this. If something's going to be a big deal for you, say it before it turns into a meltdown." She nodded and said she appreciated how calm and patient I was about everything. I thought we'd moved past it, but that definitely wouldn't be the last time something like this happened. Over the next few months, incidents like that started popping up more frequently. It wasn't daily, but it happened often enough for me to notice a concerning pattern developing. I'd be 15 minutes late picking her up for dinner, and she'd be cold and distant the entire ride, treating my minor tardiness like a personal slight. Or I'd suggest a restaurant for our date night, and she'd snap back with something like, "You never want to try what I like. It's always about your preferences." These were always little things, never anything major or relationship ending, but they had a way of building up over time. What made it even more frustrating was the weird aftermath that followed every single outburst. After every one of these episodes, Victoria would act like it had never happened. She'd completely reset her attitude and behavior, as if someone had hit a magical restart button on her personality. When I'd bring up what had happened the night before, not even aggressively, just something casual like, "Hey, that was kind of harsh last night," she'd respond with lines like, "Why are you always focused on the negative? Can't you just let things go?" So I started keeping mental notes about these incidents. Just little reminders to myself about what had actually happened versus how she was choosing to remember or reframe things. And I began pushing back more consistently when I felt like I needed to stand my ground. I remember one particular incident when we were shopping at Best Buy together. Victoria spotted this elaborate smart speaker setup, some high-end system with multiple components that would sync throughout an apartment. The price tag was $180, which isn't necessarily crazy money, but we weren't even living together at this point in our relationship. I asked her, "Do you really need that right now?" It was a genuine question, not an attack on her judgment. She immediately snapped back, "Wow, so now you're policing my spending? That's really attractive, Tyler." I replied calmly, "No, I'm just saying you've been talking about saving money for bigger things we want to do together. Then you throw money at stuff you don't actually need. I'm trying to understand the logic." Instead of explaining her reasoning or having a normal conversation about it, she walked off. Literally stormed down the electronics aisle like I'd said something completely unforgivable. I let her cool off for about 20 minutes, giving her space to process whatever she was feeling. When she finally came back, she was pretending like nothing had happened. That same magical reset I was getting used to. I asked her directly, "Are we good? Do you want to talk about what just happened back there?" She smiled like a movie character and said, "You're lucky I love you." The way she said it didn't feel sweet or affectionate. It felt like a warning, like she was doing me some kind of favor by staying with me despite my obvious flaws. That line stuck with me for days because something about it felt fundamentally wrong. It wasn't the kind of thing someone says when they're genuinely happy in a relationship. I ended up talking to my cousin Marcus about the whole situation later that week. Marcus is an electrician with absolutely no filter. And he's a few years older than me, so he's been through his share of relationship drama. He's the kind of guy who tells you exactly what he thinks, whether you want to hear it or not. When I finished explaining what had been happening with Victoria, he just looked at me and said, "Bro, if she's acting like this now, what's it going to be like when you two live together? You think this behavior is going to get better when she has more control over your daily life?" I didn't have a good answer for that question, but I also wasn't ready to start making excuses for her behavior. I just thought maybe Victoria was still figuring things out in our relationship. She was passionate. That's what I kept telling myself. She felt big emotions intensely and wasn't afraid to show them. Yeah, sometimes that energy came out sideways, but nobody's perfect, right? We'd also shared some genuinely great times together that I didn't want to discount. We'd taken road trips that were amazing, spent entire nights binge-watching reality shows and laughing until our stomachs hurt, and had deep conversations about stuff that actually mattered to both of us. So despite all the red flags and Marcus's warnings, I decided to propose to Victoria. Let me be clear about something. This wasn't one of those swept-off-your-feet romantic moments you see in movies. I wasn't being pressured into it, and I didn't do it because I was afraid she might leave me or anything like that. I proposed because, at that time, I genuinely believed we were building something meaningful together. We'd been together for a little over a year at that point. Despite all the weird arguments and emotional flare-ups I've described, I figured that was just part of being with someone who was strong-willed and knew what she wanted. Not everyone is soft-spoken and naturally chill like me, and I thought maybe I needed to learn how to better navigate a relationship with someone who expressed herself more dramatically. I planned something simple that I knew she'd appreciate. Victoria loved hiking, so I decided to take her up to the Blue Ridge Mountains to this beautiful spot that wasn't too far from where we lived. I packed a little lunch for us and brought Bruno along for the adventure. It was one of those perfect Virginia days with clear skies and comfortable weather. Everything just felt right. I proposed at the top of the trail, with the mountains stretching out behind us. She immediately started crying and said yes, which was the reaction I was hoping for. But almost instantly, she started talking about the kind of ring box we'd need to use for photos she wanted to post on social media. Even in that moment, her mind was already jumping ahead to how she'd present this milestone to other people. The next few weeks after the engagement were incredibly intense. Not bad necessarily, just hyper-focused in a way that felt overwhelming. Victoria had apparently been planning our wedding in her head for months because she already had Pinterest boards created for everything you could possibly imagine. Flowers, dresses, bridesmaid poses, dance choreography, signature cocktails. And she wasn't even much of a drinker, but she still had the whole cocktail menu planned out. She had mood boards laid out for every aspect of the reception and ceremony. I didn't really care about most of the wedding details, honestly. My only real request was that we not go broke trying to impress people we barely talk to on a regular basis. I wanted our wedding to be about us and our closest family and friends, not about creating some elaborate spectacle that would put us in debt for years. That's when the first real wedding fight happened, and it was a doozy. Victoria found this venue out in Richmond that she'd apparently been researching for weeks. I'll admit it was absolutely stunning. A modern glass building with lake views and an on-site chef who specialized in upscale catering. It looked like something you'd see in a wedding magazine, the kind of place that would photograph beautifully and impress every single guest. It also cost $16,000 just to book the space. That was before catering, photography, flowers, music, or anything else we'd need for the actual wedding. When she showed me the pricing information, I had to be direct with her. "We can't afford that," I said simply. Her face dropped like I'd just told her we'd be getting married in a gas station bathroom. The disappointment and hurt in her expression was immediate and dramatic. "Why do you always shoot down my ideas before we even discuss them?" she asked, her voice getting higher. "I've been dreaming about having a beautiful wedding forever. Can't you just let me have this one thing?" I tried to explain my perspective calmly. "Victoria, it's not one thing. It's literally the first major expense we're looking at, and it already eats up half our entire budget. We still need to pay for food, music, flowers, photography, our clothes, and everything else. Do you want to have this wedding, or do you want to have a wedding and actually be able to afford a future together afterward?" She got very quiet for a moment, and then she just left my apartment without saying another word. I figured she needed some time to process what I'd said and think about the financial reality of what she was asking for. She texted me later that night. "I didn't realize you thought I was so irresponsible with money. This really hurts, Tyler." I called her immediately, and we ended up talking for over an hour. She cried during parts of the conversation, and I listened to everything she had to say. Then she said something that really got to me. "I just want everything to be beautiful and perfect for our special day. Is that asking too much?" I told her no, that wasn't too much to ask for. But I also explained that perfect doesn't have to mean financially irresponsible or putting us in debt. We could have something beautiful and meaningful without bankrupting ourselves in the process. Eventually, we seemed to move past the disagreement. Over the next couple of weeks, things smoothed out between us. Or maybe I was just getting better at tuning out the smaller conflicts and focusing on the positive aspects of our relationship. She picked out her dress, and I helped design the wedding invitations. Everything seemed like it was moving in the right direction. Then she booked a DJ without asking me, or even mentioning it beforehand. When I found out, I brought it up casually, and she just waved her hand dismissively like it was no big deal. "I didn't think you'd care about the music anyway," she said with a shrug. That comment bugged me. And not because I'm some kind of music expert or dance floor enthusiast. It bothered me because she didn't even check with me or consider that I might have an opinion about something that was supposed to be our wedding, not just hers. Then we had another weird moment that really stuck with me. We were hanging out in my home office, which is where I keep my model airplane display. These are builds I'd been working on for years, some of them since college. Building them is something that helps me think and keeps my hands busy when I'm feeling stressed. It's been a hobby of mine for a long time, and I'm genuinely proud of the work I've put into them. Victoria stared at the shelf for a moment and then said, "So when we move in together, we're going to find another spot for these, right?" "No," I replied. "That's my stuff, and it's staying where it is." She laughed, but it wasn't a funny laugh. It was condescending. "You can't be serious. You think that fits in a grown-up's living room?" I looked her straight in the eye and said firmly, "Victoria, I'm not giving up stuff that makes me happy just so our place looks like a magazine spread that nobody actually lives in." She rolled her eyes dramatically and walked out of the room without another word. I didn't chase after her or try to continue the argument. I wasn't about to defend my right to enjoy model airplanes in my own home. But this wasn't really about the planes themselves. This was about control and her expectation that I'd just automatically defer to her vision of what our life together should look like. She came back about an hour later acting completely normal. She sat down on the couch, turned on a show, and leaned into me like she hadn't just disrespected something I genuinely cared about. It was that same magical reset behavior I was getting used to. Pretend the storm never happened and expect me to go along with it. This was starting to become Victoria's standard operating procedure. She'd create conflict, say something hurtful or dismissive, then act like nothing had happened and expect me to just move on without addressing what had occurred. I wasn't willing to play that game anymore, but I also wasn't about to start World War III over every single disagreement we had. I was trying to pick my battles and let things go when they weren't worth sacrificing my peace of mind. But I was definitely keeping mental notes now. Victoria wasn't just strong-willed like I'd been telling myself. She was dismissive and condescending when it suited her. And my opinions were only valid when they happened to line up perfectly with what she wanted. The real turning point for me came during a family dinner at her parents' house. We were all sitting around the table having what seemed like a normal conversation when her mom brought up our wedding planning. "Victoria told us you're finally loosening up the budget," her mother said with a knowing smile. "Smart choice. No one wants to look back on their wedding day and remember that it was cheap." Victoria just smiled and sipped her wine like she hadn't completely lied about me behind my back. I stayed calm but was direct in my response. "Actually, we haven't changed our budget at all," I said clearly. "We've just reprioritized how we want to spend the money we set aside." Victoria shot me a look under the table that could have killed a small animal. But I didn't back down or try to smooth things over. She could shoot daggers at me all she wanted. I wasn't going to fold just to keep the peace anymore. If I had to choose between being liked by her parents and being respected as an equal partner in this relationship, I'd take respect every single time. Later that night, after we got back to my place, I asked her directly why she had told her parents that I was loosening up our budget when that wasn't true. She shrugged like it was no big deal. It was just easier than getting into another argument with them about money. You know how they are. "So you lie to your parents and make me look like I'm just giving into pressure when that's not what happened?" I asked. "They're old school, Tyler. They think the guy should provide everything for the wedding. I was just trying to avoid drama." I told her straight up, "If that's what they think, then it's your job to correct them and set the record straight. It's not okay to throw me under the bus just because it's easier than having an uncomfortable conversation with your family." She said I was making a big deal over nothing, which was becoming her go-to line whenever I called her out on something. I looked her in the eye and said, "Listen, if you want to spend your life with me, then don't treat me like I'm just some background character in your personal show. I'm not going to be the guy who just nods along and signs checks while you make all the real decisions." She didn't say anything in response. She just went to bed early without another word. The next day, she was back to acting completely normal again, like clockwork. But I was starting to realize something important. This pattern wasn't going to get better on its own, not unless I did something serious about it. After that dinner at her parents' house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with our relationship. Not just a little wrong, not "she's stressed about the wedding" or "we're going through a rough patch" type of wrong. It was something deeper and more concerning. I was starting to feel like a guest in my own life, someone who was just watching things happen to me instead of being an active participant in the decision-making process. That night, after Victoria had gone to bed early without addressing what had happened, I sat on the couch and stared at the wall for maybe an hour. Bruno curled up next to me like he somehow knew something was bothering me. That dog always knows when I'm upset. I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone, looking back at pictures from when Victoria and I had first started dating. There was one of us at the beach where she was laughing at some stupid joke I'd made, and a video of her dancing around my kitchen in her socks while making pancakes on a Sunday morning. That version of Victoria, the one who seemed genuinely happy and carefree, I missed her. But I couldn't tell if that person was gone forever or if she was just buried under all the stress and expectations surrounding our wedding. I started wondering if maybe this wedding planning process was turning both of us into people we didn't even recognize. Maybe the pressure of trying to plan this perfect day was bringing out the worst in both of us, and things would go back to normal once we got married and all this chaos was behind us. So I began seriously thinking about backing out, not just from the wedding, but from the entire relationship. I'm not the type of guy who runs away when things get difficult, but I'm also not willing to stick around in a situation that's making me feel smaller and less respected every day. I'm 29 years old, and I'm not about to tie myself legally and financially to a life where I feel like I have to constantly earn respect in my own home. But I also didn't want to look back 5 years from now and wonder if I had quit too soon. Regret has a way of sneaking up on you during quiet moments, and I didn't want to spend the rest of my life second-guessing myself. I wanted to be able to look at myself in the mirror and know that I had given our relationship everything I had. No what-ifs, no second-guessing, just clear boundaries and honest communication. So I decided I would give Victoria one more genuine chance to turn things around. But it had to be real change, not just me continuing to give while she took. She had to meet me halfway and show me that she was willing to work on the issues I'd been bringing up. I brought up the conversation 3 days later while we were having lunch together. I kept it simple and direct. Victoria, we've been off lately, and I think we both feel it. I don't want us to keep going down this path if we're not actually working well together. She immediately got defensive, which was exactly what I expected. She said I was being negative and focusing on problems instead of appreciating all the progress we'd made as a couple. She accused me of always looking for things to criticize instead of celebrating the good moments we shared. This isn't about being negative, I replied. This is about being honest with each other. Do you genuinely feel like we're working together as a team right now? Because I don't. She hesitated for a moment, and then her tone softened slightly. I think I've been overwhelmed, she admitted. This wedding planning stuff is it's a lot to handle. And I know I've been snappy and difficult lately, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. I nodded and said, I believe that you love me. But love isn't the issue here. Respect is. And right now, I don't feel like we're treating each other with the kind of respect that should exist between two people who want to build a life together. She looked away and didn't respond to that comment, which told me everything I needed to know. But I continued anyway. I told her I was willing to take a step back from all the wedding chaos. Maybe scale down our plans, maybe just hit the reset button entirely. We could focus on just being together for a while, with less planning and more breathing room to figure out if we actually worked as a couple. Surprisingly, she agreed with that idea. She said she wanted that too, and that maybe we'd both gotten caught up in trying to plan the perfect wedding instead of focusing on building a strong relationship. For the next week, things actually got significantly better between us. We completely stopped talking about wedding venues, flower arrangements, dress fittings, and all the other planning details that had been consuming our conversations. Instead, we went for long walks together, cooked dinner at home without any distractions, and watched movies without constantly checking our phones or getting sidetracked by wedding Pinterest boards. During this break from all the chaos, I started seeing glimpses of the woman I had originally fallen for. Victoria laughed more easily, didn't snap at me when I forgot to take out the trash or left dishes in the sink, and she even started asking me genuine questions about how work was going. More importantly, she actually listened to my answers without zoning out or immediately shifting the conversation back to herself. I began thinking that maybe I had overreacted to everything that had been happening. Maybe our problems really were just stress-related, and things were totally salvageable if we could both commit to communicating better and being more considerate of each other's feelings. Then, one evening, we were sitting at my place, having what started as a completely normal, relaxed conversation about our wedding guest list. It should have been simple, just figuring out how many people we wanted to invite and making sure we hadn't forgotten anyone important. Victoria mentioned that she wanted to invite a bunch of her college friends that I had never met. Some of these were people she hadn't even spoken to in years, but she insisted they needed to be there because they had been such an important part of her life. I asked if we could maybe trim the list down a little bit, just to keep the numbers manageable and the costs reasonable. She went completely quiet for several seconds and then said, "Why do you always try to control everything we do?" I was genuinely confused by her response. "Victoria, I'm not trying to control anything. I'm trying to coordinate and plan something that works for both of us. There's a big difference. She stood up from the couch and started pacing around my living room, which I recognized as a bad sign. Then she spun around to face me and said, "You just don't want me to be happy, do you?" That line lit something inside me that I couldn't ignore. "Don't do that," I said firmly. "Don't twist this conversation like I'm some kind of villain who's trying to ruin your life because I suggested inviting fewer strangers to our wedding." She stepped toward me with her hands clenched into fists and her face turning red with anger. Then, and I swear this happened in the blink of an eye, she reached out and scratched my forearm hard. It was like being attacked by an angry cat. She dug her nails in and dragged them across my skin. I immediately pulled my arm back and looked down. There were 3 red lines across my forearm, and one of them had broken the skin enough to start bleeding a little. "Did you just—" I started, but I was so shocked that I couldn't even finish the sentence. Victoria froze instantly, and her facial expression changed from rage to regret in a split second. "I didn't mean to do that," she said quickly. "I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to hurt you, I cut her off immediately. "No, stop talking right now." She tried to step closer to me, but I backed away from her. "Victoria, you do not put your hands on me. Ever. I don't care how angry you are or how frustrated you feel about something we're discussing." I said this slowly and quietly, making sure she understood every word. "If you put your hands on me again, you'll only ever see me from across a courtroom after that. That's not a threat, that's a promise." She started crying and saying it was an accident. She claimed she had blacked out and didn't know what she was doing. She said it was because she hadn't eaten enough that day, because she was stressed about everything, because it felt like our entire relationship was falling apart and she didn't know how to handle it. I told her flat out, this exact behavior is the thing that will end our relationship permanently. I'm not playing the let's forgive and forget game when it comes to physical aggression. If it happens again, we're done. Not a discussion, not a negotiation, just over. She nodded and said she understood completely. She promised it would never happen again and that she was horrified by her own behavior. I didn't believe her, not really. But I still decided to stay because I needed to see this through to the end. I needed to know that if I eventually walked away, I wasn't doing it out of impulse or because of one bad week. I wasn't going to give up on someone who might have been able to get better if I had just been more patient with her. So I gave her one last shot, but I wasn't naive about it. I was already watching the clock in the back of my head, mentally counting down to what felt like an inevitable ending. Then, on a Sunday afternoon, we were sitting in my living room on what should have been a perfectly calm, peaceful day. The weather was nice, it was quiet in the neighborhood, and Bruno was passed out near the sliding door, snoring like a little truck engine. I had just finished making us both grilled cheese sandwiches, and we were halfway through watching a movie together. That's when Victoria pulled out her phone and said, "Okay, hear me out," while flipping the screen toward me like she had just discovered buried treasure. She started showing me this insane designer lighting setup she had seen on some wedding influencer's video. It was this elaborate LED wall display that would project our initials in custom lighting, and it was programmable to do this slow glow fade effect, while a fog machine pumped out mist during our first dance. The whole thing was incredibly over-the-top and theatrical, definitely not something that fit with the more intimate wedding we had been discussing. It was also not cheap. The rental cost was $2,900 plus delivery fees and labor costs to set it up and operate it during the reception. I didn't react immediately or dismissively. Victoria was already smiling and waiting for my approval, like a kid holding up a drawing she was proud of. I nodded slowly and said, "All right, let's take a look at our budget tonight and see where we are financially before making that call." That was literally all I said. I didn't say no, I didn't roll my eyes, and I didn't criticize her idea. I just suggested we check our actual numbers first before committing to spending almost $3,000 on lighting effects. And that was apparently enough to set her off completely. She dropped her smile instantly and said, "So what? You think it's too much money already? You've already decided it's not worth it?" I replied, still staying completely calm. I didn't say that at all. I said, let's look at the budget and see what we're working with. If we can make it work financially, then great. If not, then we figure out how to adjust. She folded her arms and started scowling at me. "You're always doing this exact same thing," she said, her voice getting louder. "You act like you're going to consider my ideas and be open-minded about them, but you're really just planning to say no from the beginning. You're cheap, Tyler. That's what this is really about. You hide it under all this logic and structure bullshit, but you just don't want to spend money on anything that actually matters to me." I was halfway through opening my laptop to actually pull up our budget spreadsheet and show her the real numbers when she reached over, grabbed the computer, and slammed it down onto the floor like it was a frisbee. It hit the hardwood floor hard, and I heard something crack inside it. I just sat there for a second, blinking and trying to process what had just happened. Then she started yelling at me again. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," she screamed. "You care more about your stupid spreadsheets and your precious budget than you do about me. You treat me like I'm asking for diamonds and caviar when all I want is something nice and special for our wedding day," I said firmly. "Victoria, you need to stop this right now." But she didn't stop. Instead, she kept going. "You know what? If I don't get to have what I want for this wedding, then neither do you." She turned and stormed down the hallway toward my home office. I followed her, already knowing this wasn't going to end well. She went straight to my model airplane display. These weren't little kid toys. They were complex, detailed models that I had built over the course of years. Some of them were aircraft replicas, others were vintage fighter planes, and I had a couple of World War II bombers that had taken me months to complete. They were displayed on custom shelves that I had mounted myself, and I was genuinely proud of the work and craftsmanship that had gone into both building them and displaying them properly. Without any hesitation, Victoria shoved the entire middle shelf down with both hands. Models crashed to the floor, and pieces scattered everywhere across my office. One of them hit the ground so hard that a piece of the wing bounced under my desk. Some of these builds were completely destroyed. There was no repairing them. She looked me straight in the eye and said with complete satisfaction, "You're not going to be surrounded by your little toys while I get nothing that I want." Then she grabbed her purse and headed toward the door, like she was actually proud of what she had just done. That's when I finally stood up and let her have it. I looked directly at her and said, "Listen, you're a spoiled, entitled brat, Victoria." She stopped walking toward the door and turned around to face me. "Everything has to revolve around you," I continued. "Your wants, your timing, your mood swings, your dramatic reactions to everything. You break things, throw tantrums like a child, and then expect apologies for your behavior. You think love means letting you steamroll over someone and smile while you do it. I was just getting started. You act like I'm cheap and unreasonable because I won't burn money on dumb, shiny crap that we can't afford. But here's the thing. You haven't paid for a single part of this wedding. Not $1. You think you can manipulate me by calling me boring or controlling, hoping it'll make me fold and give you whatever you want? Well, guess what? You're just pissed off that I finally told you no, and you couldn't handle hearing it." Victoria just stood there, staring at me with her mouth slightly open, like she couldn't believe I was actually saying these things to her. "You want to know what this is really about?" I said. "You can't stand the fact that someone won't let you have your way for once in your life. You're so used to getting what you want by throwing fits and breaking things that you don't know how to function when someone has boundaries." Then she whipped the front door open and slammed it behind her so hard that I thought she might have damaged the frame. Like somehow that proved she was right about everything. I stood there in the quiet for a few minutes, my heart still pounding from the confrontation. Then I walked into the kitchen, got my phone, and came back to survey the damage she had caused. I started recording a video, slowly panning over the broken model airplane sets, the bent and dented shelf, my cracked laptop, and the scuffed hardwood floor where she had stomped around in her heels while destroying my stuff. After I had the video evidence, I took detailed photos of everything from multiple angles. I wanted clear documentation of the damage in case I needed it later. Once I had thoroughly documented everything, I called my lawyer. "I think we're done," I told him simply. "All right," he replied without missing a beat. "Tell me everything that happened." I gave him the complete timeline of events, from the lighting setup argument to the physical destruction of my property. He listened carefully and then told me exactly what steps I needed to take to protect myself. "Freeze all shared accounts immediately," he instructed. "Cancel anything that has her name on it or is tied to wedding deposits that you've made. Change your locks just in case she decides to come back. And from this point forward, keep all communication documented. Don't talk to her on the phone. Everything needs to be in writing." By the next morning, I had everything in motion. I contacted the caterers, the venue, the DJ, and the photo booth company, basically everyone we had hired for the wedding, and canceled everything. Since we hadn't hit the non-refundable deadline for most of the vendors yet, I managed to get the majority of our money back. Everything had been booked under my name or charged to my credit card anyway, since Victoria had never actually contributed any money to the wedding planning. The joint savings account we had opened together was frozen, and I withdrew my contribution from our emergency fund. I let the bank handle her access to whatever remained. I changed all my passwords, deleted our shared files from cloud storage, and made sure I had legal protection ready if she tried to retaliate. I also had the venue send me complete transaction logs, just in case she tried to claim later that she had paid for everything. Then I sent Victoria a single direct message. "We're done. Please forward any future communication through my attorney. Your access to joint accounts and wedding services has been terminated. That night, I called my cousin Marcus and told him everything that had happened. I went through the whole story. What Victoria had done to my stuff, how she destroyed my laptop, the model airplanes scattered across my office floor, and the screaming match that had finally ended our relationship. I told him about every detail of her meltdown and how I had finally reached my breaking point. Marcus didn't even sound surprised by any of it. "I've been waiting for this day, man," he said with a knowing tone. "You've been walking on glass while she's been swinging a hammer around." I could see this coming from miles away. That comment actually made me crack up. It was the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. The way he put it was so perfectly accurate that I couldn't help but find it funny, even in the middle of all this chaos. "You doing okay?" Marcus asked, his tone getting more serious. "I will be," I replied honestly. He paused for a moment, then said, "Listen, don't answer the door when she comes back crying and apologizing. And she will come back. I'm already bracing for it. You need to brace smart too, because she's not done with this drama until she's made herself into the victim of the whole situation. And if she can't spin this story to make you look like the bad guy, she'll escalate to something worse." Then he gave me some advice that really stuck. "Protect your peace, Tyler. That's not a suggestion, that's a requirement. Don't let her drag you back into her chaos." Marcus wasn't wrong about any of this. He's the kind of guy who keeps it brutally honest because he's seen what happens when you don't. His ex-wife had tried the same guilt and manipulation playbook on him years ago, and he still had the legal bills to prove how expensive that drama had been. So when Marcus gives relationship advice, I listen carefully. Victoria didn't respond to my message for almost 40 hours. I knew exactly what that silence meant. She was waiting for me to send the follow-up text. She was expecting the "maybe we can talk about this" message or the olive branch that I had always extended in the past after our fights. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I was done being the one who always reached out first to smooth things over. On day 3, she finally texted me, "Hey, I still need the login information for the seating chart website. I forgot to save the password and I need to finish the arrangements." She was acting like nothing significant had happened. Like she hadn't just destroyed thousands of dollars worth of my property and blown up our entire relationship. She was pretending this was just a normal request between two people planning a wedding together. I ignored the message completely. A few hours later, she sent another text. "You're being immature about this. This is both of our weddings, so stop acting like a child just because we had a fight." I didn't respond to that one either. On day 4, I had 6 missed calls from her and a long voicemail. In the message, she was crying and saying she was sorry. She claimed she was overwhelmed by everything and didn't mean to hurt me. She said I had always understood her better than anyone else in her life, and she didn't know why I was shutting her out now. She wasn't wrong about the fact that I used to understand her, but I also used to make excuses for her behavior and enable her worst impulses. I wasn't going to do that anymore. Then came the shift in her approach. On day 5, she showed up at my house unannounced. Her makeup was smeared, her hands were shaking, and she was in full emotional meltdown mode. She asked if we could talk, and she said she didn't even understand why she had reacted the way she did. She claimed she had blacked out and lost control, like she wasn't responsible for her own actions. I let her speak and get everything out. Then I looked her straight in the face and said something I had been thinking about for days. "You know what the saddest part of all this is? I warned you over and over again. I let so much slide, stuff that would have had any other guy walking out on you months ago. But you saw my patience as weakness. You thought I'd just keep folding and giving in like it was my job to keep you happy while you burned down everything in front of me." She tried to interrupt me, but she didn't even get 2 words out before I continued. "You broke my trust, you destroyed my property, and you completely disrespected me as a person. You gambled everything on the idea that I would never actually leave you. Well, guess what? You lost that bet. The house always wins, and I just cashed out. You don't get to play the victim now." I wasn't finished with what I had to say. I stepped forward and dropped the final truth on her. "You were never actually in love with me, Victoria. You were in love with the control. You were in love with being right all the time, with winning every argument, with getting your way no matter what the cost. But you lost the second you thought I wouldn't have the backbone to walk away from this relationship." She looked like she was frantically trying to figure out what emotion to fake next, what manipulation tactic might still work on me. Then her expression changed completely and she said, "Fine. You'll regret this decision, Tyler. No one will ever love you the way I did." I actually laughed at that. "I genuinely hope no one ever loves me the way you did," I replied. "That kind of love is a slow death. It's suffocating and controlling and completely one-sided." I stepped back, opened my front door wide, and said without blinking, "Go run back to whoever still believes your poor me act. I'm not that guy anymore." She stood there for several seconds like she was expecting me to soften my position or change my mind. But I didn't move, didn't say anything else, and didn't give her any indication that this conversation was going to continue. Finally, I shut the door in her face while she was still standing there and locked it immediately. Then I opened it one more time and said, "Hey, Victoria." She turned around halfway, still fuming and clearly expecting me to apologize or invite her back inside. "You need to leave my property right now. And next time you show up here without being invited, I'm filing harassment charges against you." I thought that would be the end of it. I figured I had seen the worst of Victoria's behavior and that she would eventually move on and find someone else to control. I was wrong. I didn't hear anything from Victoria for 3 days straight. No texts, no calls, no attempts to contact me through mutual friends. Nothing. Then she posted something on Instagram that made it clear she was far from done with this drama. It was a black and white photo of herself looking contemplative, accompanied by a long caption. "I ended my engagement today to protect my peace." When someone starts controlling your joy, your personal space, and your finances, it's time to leave. You are not crazy, you are not too much, you are just finally too smart to stay in a toxic situation. The post continued. "Sometimes you have to walk away from people who don't respect your needs, your emotions, or your mental health. I refuse to shrink myself for a man who made me feel small and insignificant. I'm a queen, and I will always choose myself over someone who tries to dim my light." You could practically hear the Beyoncé soundtrack playing in the background. It didn't take a genius to figure out who that passive-aggressive post was aimed at. She wasn't naming me directly, but everyone in our social circle knew exactly what she was talking about. Then came the direct messages from mutual friends. Some people just asked if I was okay and wanted to hear my side of the story. But others told me that Victoria had been texting them behind the scenes with her version of events. According to these friends, she was telling people that I had emotionally neglected her throughout our relationship. She claimed that I had controlled our finances and isolated her from her friends. And here's the most ridiculous part. She was saying that I had used her for attention and validation, then discarded her like trash when she got too real and started expressing her authentic feelings. I kept my responses simple. I just replied to people, "I'm doing fine, and I have everything documented if anyone needs to know the truth." And I really did have everything documented. That night, I opened a private folder on my laptop and organized all the evidence I had collected. I included the photos of my broken model airplane sets, my cracked laptop, the dented shelf, and the scuffed walls and floors where Victoria had stomped around in her heels while destroying my office. Most importantly, I included a picture I had taken of my forearm from 2 weeks earlier. It showed the 3 thin scratches, red and raised, from when Victoria had grabbed me during our argument. I had never planned to use that photo for anything. I had only taken it because something told me I might need proof someday of what had actually happened. That someday had arrived. I forwarded the complete package of evidence to my lawyer. He didn't hesitate for even a second after reviewing everything. "We're filing for a restraining order tomorrow morning," he said. "This will include the physical evidence of assault, financial interference, property damage, and harassment. Let her try to spin this story when a judge sees the real facts." Let me be clear about something. I didn't want revenge against Victoria. I just wanted her completely out of my life. But apparently that's not what Victoria wanted. Because that night around 1:20 in the morning, I woke up to a loud metallic crunching sound coming from outside my house. Bruno immediately went absolutely nuts, barking and running around like something terrible was happening. I jumped out of bed and looked through my upstairs window to see what was going on. Victoria's car was halfway through my garage door. She hadn't even attempted to brake or slow down. She had just driven straight into it at full speed. The front bumper was completely smashed, and the garage door frame was bent inward from the impact. She reversed about a foot, and then just sat there with her headlights still on and the engine running. Then she opened her car door and stumbled out onto my driveway. She was barefoot and clearly drunk, swaying as she tried to maintain her balance. She started yelling before I had even made it downstairs to see what was happening. "You ruined everything," she screamed at my house. "I gave you my entire life, and you threw it away like it meant nothing." I didn't open my front door or even get close to the windows. Instead, I immediately hit the record button on my doorbell camera, which thank God I had upgraded to a better system just a week earlier. Then I called the police while Victoria was still screaming in my driveway. Tyler, come out here and face what you did to me," she continued yelling. "You destroyed everything we were building together." She started throwing things from her car, first a makeup bag, then one of her shoes. Then she tried kicking my front door, which only made her fall backward onto the lawn since she was too drunk to maintain her balance. The police showed up 7 minutes later, which felt like an eternity. Victoria tried to argue with them and slurred something about me abandoning her and stealing her future. The officers weren't having any of it. They breathalyzed her on the spot, and she failed miserably. They put her in handcuffs while she was still yelling at me and at them. I handed the responding officer the footage from my garage security camera, plus the complete file of evidence I had already compiled over the past few days. This included the photos of my scratched arm, the property damage, voice memos I had recorded, and screenshots of her threatening text messages. I didn't need to say much to the officers. I just provided the facts and let the evidence speak for itself. The lead officer looked through everything I had documented and said, "You've done everything right here. Good documentation. You're going to be protected." They towed Victoria's car from my driveway, and she was immediately charged with DUI, criminal trespassing, and property damage. By the next morning, I had a full restraining order in place that was court-signed and officially served to her. That night, I received a text message from a phone number I didn't recognize. "You made me look crazy to everyone we know. You destroyed everything we were building together. If something doesn't happen to fix this situation, someone else will make sure you regret what you've done." That was the message word for word. I didn't respond to it at all. Instead, I immediately sent it to my lawyer and forwarded it to the police department. Another charge was added to Victoria's growing list of legal problems: criminal threats and harassment. Victoria's life started spiraling out of control very quickly after that. Her job caught wind of her arrest and the charges against her. She worked for an event planning agency where image and reputation matter significantly in that industry. She was asked to take an indefinite leave of absence while the legal issues were resolved. According to a mutual friend who reached out to check on me, even Victoria's own family members were distancing themselves from her behavior. Her cousin apparently told people, "I warned her this would happen eventually. She's on her own now." The court date came exactly 2 weeks after the garage incident. First up was the restraining order hearing, which was pretty straightforward. The judge quickly skimmed through the file that my lawyer handed over, then looked directly at Victoria and her legal representation. "Ma'am, are you disputing the physical altercation, the property damage, or the DUI arrest that brought us here today?" the judge asked. Victoria's lawyer tried the usual approach. "Your Honor, my client is under significant emotional distress. She has no prior criminal history, and this was an isolated incident during a very difficult time in her life." The judge cut him off immediately. "I don't care if she cured cancer last year," he said firmly. She crossed multiple clear legal lines here. The restraining order is granted effective immediately. The terms were strict: 18 months of no contact whatsoever, no physical proximity to me or my property, and no online harassment of any kind. If Victoria so much as liked a tweet that I posted, it would be considered a violation of the court order. Then came the separate property damage hearing, which was handled in small claims court but was serious enough to require formal legal proceedings. I had documented everything meticulously, so I was well prepared for this part of the process. The garage repair estimate came to $6,400. My laptop replacement cost $1,350. The custom shelving in my office, the destroyed model airplane builds, and the scratches on my hardwood floor were assessed at $3,600 in total value. This assessment was based on itemized proof and an expert statement from a hobbyist evaluator that my lawyer had hired to properly document the value of the destroyed models. The total damage Victoria had caused came to just under $11,350. Her lawyer tried to argue that emotions had been running high during our breakup and that the items she had destroyed weren't essential living tools or necessities. He suggested that the court should consider the emotional context of the situation and perhaps reduce the financial penalty. The judge raised an eyebrow and looked directly at Victoria's attorney. "Are you trying to tell me that it's acceptable to destroy someone else's property as long as the person doing the destroying is emotionally upset? Because that's definitely not how the law works in this courtroom." The verdict was swift and decisive. Full restitution was ordered, plus court fees. Victoria was instructed to pay me $11,040 over the next 6 months, or she would face wage garnishment to collect the money automatically from her paychecks. Victoria's lawyer looked like he had aged 5 years when the judge read the final ruling. Victoria herself didn't say a single word on the way out of the courtroom. She just kept her head down and avoided making eye contact with anyone. Her mother tried to follow me out of the courtroom afterward. She started to open her mouth like she was going to deliver some kind of final dramatic speech or lecture about how I had treated her daughter. My lawyer immediately shut that down before she could say a word. "If you approach my client again, I'll file harassment charges against you too," he told her firmly. She backed off immediately, and they left the building without another word. Meanwhile, I was doing great. I filed an insurance claim for the garage damage, and it was approved quickly because I had everything documented on camera. The insurance company said they would pursue recovery from Victoria on the back end, so I didn't have to worry about that process. I bought a new laptop to replace the one she had destroyed. I also took down the damaged shelves in my office and ordered new ones, stronger, better quality, and mounted higher up on the wall where Bruno couldn't accidentally get into the pieces if any fell. I took all the money we had originally set aside for our honeymoon, plus every penny I had recovered from the canceled wedding expenses, and booked myself a solo trip to Montana. It was a 4-day, all-inclusive adventure retreat that included off-road driving instruction, hands-on automotive mechanics training, and real mountain trail experiences. I hadn't smiled that hard or felt that free in months. The whole experience taught me something really important about relationships and personal boundaries. You can't love someone into respecting you, and you can't compromise your way out of being controlled by another person. Some people see kindness as weakness and interpret patience as permission to push boundaries even further. Victoria wasn't broken or damaged in the way I had tried to convince myself. She was entitled and completely used to getting her way through manipulation and emotional outbursts. When someone shows you who they really are, you need to believe them the first time instead of making excuses for their behavior. A few months later, I heard through mutual friends that Victoria had moved back in with her parents. She had lost her job permanently after the background check revealed her criminal charges. She also had to complete community service as part of her DUI sentence. Apparently, she was still posting cryptic Instagram quotes about toxic men and finding your self-worth, but some people never learn from their mistakes. As for me, I was thriving. I got a promotion at work and expanded my model airplane collection with some new builds that I was really excited about. Bruno was still the best hiking partner a guy could ask for, and I had started dating again. I met someone who actually respected boundaries and appreciated the fact that I think carefully before spending money. It's funny how easy relationships can be when both people act like mature adults. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had stayed with Victoria instead of ending the engagement. If I had kept making excuses for her behavior, kept telling myself that things would eventually get better, kept hoping that she would mature and learn to respect boundaries, I probably would be divorced by now anyway, with half my possessions gone and likely dealing with a restraining order under much worse circumstances. It just would have taken longer to reach that point and cost me significantly more money, time, and emotional energy. The scratch marks Victoria left on my arm faded completely after a few weeks, but the lesson I learned from that experience stayed with me permanently. Never again will I allow someone to treat me like I'm disposable, while expecting me to treat them like they're precious and irreplaceable. Life is too short to spend it walking on eggshells around someone who thinks love means letting them break your stuff when they don't get their way. Looking back now, all the red flags were clearly visible from the very beginning of our relationship. The overreactions to small disagreements that should have been easily resolved. The complete inability to apologize for her behavior without making excuses or shifting blame. The way she would emotionally reset after every fight like nothing had happened, expecting me to go along with her selective amnesia. The constant need to be the center of attention in every situation. The entitlement disguised as passion and romantic intensity. I just chose to see potential instead of recognizing patterns. I convinced myself that her destructive behavior was temporary and that she would grow out of it if I was patient enough. I won't make that mistake again with anyone. These days, when I tell people this story, they always ask me the same question. How did you know when it was time to walk away? What was the final sign that told you the relationship couldn't be saved? The answer is actually pretty simple. When someone shows you that they would rather destroy what you've built together than compromise on what they want, that's when you know it's over. When they would rather hurt you than hear the word no from you. When they treat your boundaries like suggestions that they can ignore whenever it's convenient for them. When they treat your feelings like obstacles to overcome rather than important factors to consider. That's when you know you're not dealing with love anymore. You're dealing with control. And control dressed up as love is still just control, no matter how they try to package it or justify it. The best decision I ever made was choosing my own peace over Victoria's chaos. I chose my self-respect over her unreasonable demands. I chose my future over her tantrums and manipulation tactics. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to enable their worst behavior, even if they hate you for it, especially if they hate you for it. Victoria taught me that I'm much stronger than I thought I was. She showed me that I can stand up for myself when it really matters, and that I don't need someone else's approval to know my own worth. For that lesson, as painful and expensive as it was to learn, I'm actually grateful. I just wish I had learned it sooner and with a lot fewer broken model airplanes in the process. The experience also taught me to trust my instincts about people. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them immediately. Don't wait for them to prove themselves or grow into the person you hope they can become. Don't make excuses for behavior that you wouldn't tolerate from a stranger. Don't convince yourself that love means accepting treatment that damages your mental health and peace of mind. Most importantly, I learned that healthy relationships don't require you to sacrifice your dignity, your interests, your financial security, or your personal boundaries. The right person will respect these things because they understand that respecting you means respecting the things that matter to you. Victoria was never going to be that person, no matter how long I waited or how patient I tried to be. Some people are simply not capable of the mutual respect and consideration that real love requires. Recognizing that truth and acting on it was the most important decision I made during that entire relationship. Now I'm with someone who appreciates my hobbies instead of demanding I get rid of them. Someone who contributes to our shared expenses instead of expecting me to fund everything while she makes all the decisions. Someone who can disagree with me without throwing things or destroying my property. Someone who apologizes when they're wrong without making excuses or blaming their behavior on external circumstances. It turns out that healthy, mature love really is possible when you find someone who shares your values and treats you with genuine respect. You just have to be willing to walk away from anything less than that, no matter how much time you've already invested or how much you want it to work out differently.